So I'm recording. Do you want me to go ahead and go live, or do you want me to wait until we have more commission?
Commissioner Thomas, what do you suggest?
I think we can wait a few more moments. I know Beth said that she will not be able to attend.
Correct.
She's on vacation right now, but I want to see if any of the other members of the subcommittee are going to be able to join. So I'll give them to about maybe 7:03, 7:04 before we go live and get started. So the last time we got a chance to gather as a group was before the Independence Day holiday. Did anybody do anything fun or exciting over the 4th of July since we last met as a subcommittee?
No, not really.
It wasn't 4th of July, but my siblings came to Atlanta and some of my cousins, and we all went to the Hawks game that Saturday. So that was a lot of fun.
Great.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun following the Hawks, their run through the playoffs. So I was pretty bummed out when they kind of gassed out there at the end, but it was definitely a good season.
Excuse me, Commissioner Thomas, do you have a list of the attendees? Because I know we were given that in the spreadsheet a long time back, and since my system crashed and I've had to try to rebuild everything, I can't find that spreadsheet that Felicia gave us. So I'm not really up on the names to do a roll call. So
Of the subcommittee members, yeah, I can easily pull that up.
Please. And if you would happen to have that spreadsheet, could you send it to me so that I can capture that information again? I don't usually lose stuff, but when my system went down, I was pretty much dead in the water.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Let's see. Here it is. All right, I'm forwarding to you right now. Just found it.
Thank you very much. Well, I guess we need to get started. Do you not agree?
I agree. We can go ahead and get started. If we want to go live on Facebook.
I will get us live, and then I'm also going to send a message in Basecamp, just a gentle reminder of the meeting.
Okay.
All right. 1 second.
Would you be so kind as to put up our agenda for tonight, please?
Give me 1 second.
Because I can't keep on track if I don't see it. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. We are live. Pulling up the agenda.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our subcommittee meeting. We're going to have just a couple of topics to discuss tonight, but I think those are important enough that they will merit most of the minutes we have tonight to be together. So if Commissioner Thomas would please call the roll, we'll get started.
Sure. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad that you all are able to join us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and jump into doing the roll call. Commissioner James Moses.
Here.
Commissioner Alex Thomas. Here. Commissioner Zaki Anwar. Commissioner Anibal Torres. Commissioner Chris Corses Zimmerman.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner John Funny. Commissioner Danina Knight.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Marco Palma. And Commissioner Beth Wendell. I know that she was not going to be able to join us, so I know she had an excused absence for tonight. And that's it. Thank you.
Now, going to the approval of the June minutes, I don't know if I've posted those yet or not. So we'll have to skip that this time. I will get them compiled into the group this week, and we can approve them after this meeting and have them posted. So I'm moving down to the next bullet is we're going to go over the 4P data, which was an assignment that the commissioners were supposed to set down with their contract selections to fill out the 4P flow chart for data collection. And we were going to go over it as a group when we got here tonight. So I'm gonna let Stephen take that one because he seems to be the subject matter expert on.
All right. Okay, I can do this. Yeah. So at our last meeting, we talked about the 4P assessment tool. And if I can share my screen, I can go ahead and put up an image of what we took a look at the last meeting. Yeah. Can y'all see that? The 4P assessment
Yes.
tool?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So real briefly, we kind of walked through an assessment template that helps us really just kind of break down the data that we have received from the city of Brookhaven regarding the 2020 contracts. And what was provided to us was, what the work actually was, what the contract was, the firm that was secured to do the work, and then a listing of all of the firms that were contacted about the work. And my dog is starting to whine, so I'm going to put my headphones on. All right, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we took a look at the Excel spreadsheet, and each commission member took, I think, 4 or 5 different contracts and kind of looked over that information. And so we are coming back to the table tonight at our subcommittee meeting to talk about what people found in their review. And so real briefly, this 4P assessment tool takes a look at the people who are affected most by this issue. What's the impact on residents? What's the potential cost of inequity? The place, where is the work occurring? And this can also relate to, where within the organization, and the organization here is, of course, City of Brookhaven government. Where is that work taking place? Power, what are the barriers to social justice and equity work? Who's accountable for the decisions, kind of who's in the driver's seat, really. And then process. The process here specifically is around how the decisions are made regarding the awarding of contracts to certain firms over others. What policies, practices, processes, or social norms contribute to producing and or perpetuating the issue? And is the issue expanding or narrowing? As you kind of look through the data, was it something that you saw repeatedly, or did you find an issue that maybe was just kind of a singular instance and that was it? And so, yeah, so that's kind of our structure and our framework. So I don't know, Commissioner Thomas, maybe I think you had an idea about how people might potentially share their information, and we can get some discussion going. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so as we were assigned this task, this project, last month at our last subcommittee meeting. My hope was that everyone got a chance to at least review the contracts of the bids that you all selected in our chat on Basecamp, and really try to, answer some of the questions that are part of that 4P model. And if we could each go one by one in the different, categories in terms of people, place, process, and power, and just give us some of your insights about how those questions can be answered as it relates to those particular contracts. And then at the end, maybe give us a couple of big takeaways that you had from this project. And I don't mind go ahead and going first. I know that I picked several, we all picked 5 contracts. I think I might have had 1 or 2 that overlap some of the choices from others, but I can easily, I don't know how best, whether I should share my screen. I'll just kind of review the contracts that I selected. The first one that I picked was the Briarwood Road multi-use path. And as I was looking at who or what people it would affect, the first thing that came to mind was the surrounding businesses and pedestrians, because where this multi-use path is located is right along the intersection of Briarwood Road and Beaufort Highway, which is a very congested area with lots of businesses, lots of stores, lots of restaurants. And so just having that, pedestrian, even just regular, vehicle traffic, just having that impacted there as far as the construction, that was the first thing that came to mind. And then also thinking about in terms of place and, where it would, most affect is making a pedestrian friendly area of the city. So because that area is so highly congested by not only lots of cars and vehicles, but also a lot of people walk. So you got to realize that a lot of people live in apartment homes along Beaufort Highway. So that definitely came to mind, just making it more pedestrian friendly. So that way people can walk to stores and to restaurants in that area. Just have more sidewalks and more accessibility. And then the actual process of expanding the pedestrian access. And I noticed on the city's website, it mentioned that a lot of the different multi-use paths across the city, they meet the state, local, and federal standards, but some of them needed more attention more than others. And just making sure that that ADA, they're meeting all those specifications, making it more accessible to people who might have certain handicaps and disabilities. I thought that was really important. And then I was actually surprised to find that particular contract, the vendor who actually won that bid was a minority business owner. And I thought that was really helpful to see that they were choosing someone that's not only a minority business, but also someone in the local community. So they weren't directly based out of Brookhaven, but they were definitely, I believe, out of DeKalb County, so the Atlanta area. And that was really good to see. Another contract that I had was also the Murphy Candler Park South Trail. That was one that I took a look at as well in terms of the exact area that it was impacting, how many people would probably frequent that park itself. I thought it was really interesting to see where it was located, where that park was, being renovated, and really looking at the affluent area around it, kind of realizing that it'll have an impact on that surrounding community of condos, apartment complexes, and so forth. And thinking about how that's going to impact property values and rent. That was the first thing that kind of came to mind in terms of the people. And again, just making, more pedestrian friendly city across the board, I thought was really good to see. And then in terms of the process itself, taking a look at the bid, I was surprised to see how many different vendors submitted, their proposal to get the bid. I believe it was over 50 when I went on the city website and took a look at it. So it seemed like it was pretty competitive. I believe last time I checked, it was still in review. I don't know if any one particular vendor has been selected yet. Last time I saw it was in review, but it seemed like it was a lot more competitive than some of the other contracts that were listed on the city website. Yeah. And then just again, I think one of the other contracts I had, and I don't want to take up the entire time, was also the La Vista and Sheridan Granite Monuments and how that was being renovated. It seemed like there weren't quite as many proposals submitted for that one. And it looks like the actual number of, I guess, people that bid was sent out to was much smaller too. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, that the city had maybe an existing relationship with some of the ones who did receive the notice. But I think that's definitely something that's worth researching. I'll be surprised to see what the survey responses are if we're able to get responses from the vendors who submitted their proposals for that bid. And I will open up the floor if anyone else has any feedback, if they want to share maybe some of the insights to the different 4P categories that they got from some of their contracts. I will open the floor for them.
Well, I'll go next real quick because I took a completely different approach with my 4Ps than I think some of my colleagues did. Is since most of my contracts dealt with infrastructure and their service contracts for the city, I tried to look at a holistic approach across all the contracts to see, in fact, who would be the beneficiary and who would be the person who would suffer the most or not receive as much benefit, let's put it that way, about the contract. So in my response, I put the people directly affected by the whole process would be the vendors and citizens of Brookhaven. So if the contract is executed correctly and equitably, everybody will benefit. If it's not, then of course those who were not picked up and awarded a contract will be directly affected by how it impacts their business. The place to suffer in all of this would be Brookhaven, because if we don't take the time and effort to look at how we do business and try to do it equitably across the board, then the entire business structure within the city of Brookhaven suffers, because after all, we don't want to get the reputation of not being someone you want to work with. You want to be inclusive enough that you have enough citizenry and vendors in the community who says, yeah, I've worked with Brookhaven before. They're good people. They know what they're doing. They give you a fair shot and they move forward. The process, I thought about how the jobs were actually advertised across the board. So, we need to make sure that website is robust enough that people can go in and check on the jobs, bid on the jobs, and know what kind of documentation they need to submit with the jobs. Of course, the power lies within the city to make these decisions on to do the job equitably or not. And sometimes they do look at dollars over everything else, which is important to be fiscally responsible. But I think when we're wanting to be fair and equitable across the board, we have to sometimes forget that dollar amount and look at the quality of the work and the reputation of the company going in and make the changes there, because the city has the power, but the citizenry of Brookhaven has control over the city. So if there's enough incidents coming to light that maybe they weren't doing their due diligence and trying to be an all-inclusive group, changes will have to be made from the top down. And that's how I looked at it, just a holistic way of just doing business within the city and what we need to be cognizant of when we go into these things. So I may have done the whole assignment wrong, or I may have taken it in a completely different direction. So
Yeah, I'll just kind of jump in. I don't think you necessarily completed the assignment wrong. You know, it is interesting to see how whenever I guess I was looking at many of the contracts, I was looking at how those services or how that contract was going to positively affect people. But something I should have realized is that, you know, not every service provided by the city is always going to positively affect everybody. You know, if it is infrastructure and it takes a very long time for construction, it might negatively impact someone in terms of just the noise and just the commotion and congestion. So that's something I probably didn't think about as I was going through my contract. So I'm glad you actually mentioned that.
And so Commissioners Alex and Jim, thank you all for the conversation and all the work you all have done. I'm coming at this from sort of a PR perspective, and both of you all touched on a variety of public relations kinds of issues as you shared the work that you did. But, you know, ultimately, and I think I may have mentioned this in an earlier conversation, but ultimately, when a business owner goes to our website or wherever they go, if that's not functional and easy to navigate, we've got a problem before we even start with all of the other things you all have talked about. And I really like where both of you are going in terms of just making sure that things are just efficient. So really backing up and thinking about what the infrastructure looks like for a business owner, so that when they think about all things Brookhaven, because, you know, we're all totally focused on being the community that embraces everybody, but if they can't get to the bones of what they need to get to as business owners to be able to move forward, then we've got another kind of issue.
and I agree. It's a matter of not only being there, but being able to get there. So we can always say, well, the jobs are posted on the website. But if for some reason you can't get to the website to get to where the posting is, or if it's hard to navigate, and I mentioned at one time that I thought the website was a little bit hard to navigate to actually get to the page where the jobs we may be losing a lot of people, because if they have to go through a lot of work just to be able to get work, they may not be interested in doing
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'll be honest, my concern is not even so much getting to it, because I guess I didn't have as much of an issue actually getting to the RFPs and the bids, but it was just actually reading through and figuring out what was the primary focus, what was the primary job, what was the primary duties of that contract. Like the RFPs themselves are 50, 60, 70 pages long, which I realize that a lot of that is necessary just to meet the legal, I guess, threshold of what they have to do. But I can imagine for a small business owner who maybe does not have access to, you know, readily have legal counsel or somebody to read through that, it can be kind of daunting. I know myself, as I was kind of going through RFPs, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like trying to read through the contents to see where I can kind of get the nuts and bolts of what services are going to be provided. So yeah, it's definitely overwhelming.
So there's another piece, and both of you have touched on it in your comments, but just how we show up and ease of access. and, ability, somebody, how they can quickly figure out what the B is so that they can make a decision as a small business owner about whether or not that works for them or whether or not it doesn't.
Yes, and it also entails writing it in saying in simple, plain language.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of big government contracts will start with an executive page at the front of the contract that just tells you basically what services are being requested. Then the contract itself will break it down into what materials need to be used, what timeframes have to be followed, X, Y, Z. But that very first page gives the contractor a little flavor of what that contract is about, and is it worth my time and effort to go through filling out all of the documentation and submitting the proposal to meet their timelines, because their time is valuable too.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't know right off the bat, is this something I want to invest my time in? They've wasted all of that time and energy for something that once they get down into the nuts and bolts of it, they may figure out, oh, I'm not qualified to do this job, but I'm already too deep involved. I've got to go ahead and submit something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was something that was already mentioned, Commissioner Moses, on the recommendations that you sent out earlier today, but I think it might be worth noting just to see if the responses from the survey, I know we're going to talk about that later, if the responses from the actual vendors who submitted bids reflect some of our same concerns. If we're having difficulties, or at least I can speak for myself, if I'm having a hard time going through the contracts to see what's the actual services, just like what's kind of the main gist, then I can only imagine there might be a response from some of the proposals from some of the vendors. So it might just be worth kind of keeping that in mind as we're sending that survey out.
I completely agree.
And we also
Thank you.
have to be cognizant of another thing too that we haven't mentioned. Many vendors will only bid on contracts and service requests for services that they're familiar with because they have past experience. So many of them are familiar with the jargon of the industry that they're bidding on the contract. So we also have to not cross that line where it looks like forgive me if I'm being indelicate, but we're not dumbing it down. But we're making it written in such a way that everybody understands what we're asking for, but we're not, shortcutting ourselves by, well, we didn't mention that because not many people understands what's the tensile straight of concrete on an off-ramp supposed to be, as opposed to the latest standard XYZ. No, professionals will have that information. They will understand that. And most of them won't bid on something they don't understand. But I think we need to keep in mind when we write this stuff in plain language, we don't dumb it down. We just tell them simply what we want.
And I'm really comfortable with that, Commissioner Jim. I like what you said earlier about the first page being super clear and super descriptive, because then people can make a decision about whether or not they need to move forward based on how we present everything on the front end.
Is there any more insight about the 4P project?
Yeah, I can say a little bit. So it's funny that all of us kind of approached it a little bit differently. When I first started trying to look at the specific projects that I signed up for, I found it hard to do this for each of them. So what I did was to think about these 4 Ps in the context of procurement and contracting more broadly, and sort of how that impacts. but so let me see if I can pull it up. So in that case, for me, the primary stakeholders were sort of the businesses or contractors or potential candidates who might have these opportunities to bid on contracts. And the secondary group of people are, in my mind, were the people at Brookhaven whose money is going to pay for these contracts, and so they are also our stakeholders in the sense that they benefit or do not benefit from the types of projects that the city engages in, and the companies or contractors that are selected. Let's see. So in terms of place, one of the things that I was interested in when I started looking through these things was to see kind of where in the city these projects were being done. And some of them were, it's really only the site prep and construction projects that I could get a sense of where they were, but the overwhelming, so of the ones that were listed that I could really kind of understand, there were 19 of them, and 11 of the 19 were in District 1. Five were in District 2, 0 were in District 3, and 3 in District 4. So, you know, more than 50% were in District 1, which I don't know what that says, but I'm from what I understand, it is the more affluent, more white part of the city. And so that was interesting in terms of place. I was also interested, so on this spreadsheet, there was no column for whether the business is owned by a minority or not. And so that to me seemed like a pretty glaring thing for our work if we were gonna be interested in equity and in the contracting process, the fact that there's which is like the one dimension of equity that is kind of measured in these contracts or in this process, that it wasn't reflected in the spreadsheet was interesting. And it wasn't actually easy to find when you looked in the kind of invitee list, which was at first the only place I saw that. So I had to go through another aspect of the website, but I was able to find whether or not the different businesses were minority owned or not. And so it was something like between 75 and 80% of the vendors were not minorities. So or not owned by minorities. So 70%, and then and that kind of correlated as well to the amount of money that was spent. So over 75% of the money that's spent on these contracts is going to businesses owned by white people, essentially, and largely white men, from what I could tell. So it was just an interesting to go kind of a little bit deeper in what wasn't really shown, to see, thinking about power, you know, the decisions that the city makes in who they award these contracts to is, you know, the city has power, but it also is sort of transmitting power or maintaining the status quo by constantly choosing companies that are not minority owned to do, you know, or to fill these contracts, especially when it's, you know, there's hundreds in some cases of companies that are bidding on these things. It seems a little, I guess, expected, but also surprising or unfortunate that so many of them are going to businesses owned by dominant, whether that's racial or gender, or other categories. I don't know what they consider in minority owned, but anyways, so those were just some of the things that came up for me when I was thinking about the process overall, where they were where the projects were being done, which seemed to be disproportionately in white, wealthy, affluent parts of the city, and then who was being awarded the contracts, which 75% going to businesses that are not designated as minority owned.
So I want to thank you so much, Commissioner Chris, for bringing this up, because I think one of our tasks as we uncover things is to own that. And, and we've all talked about the fact that many of the things that will come to the surface may not be pleasant for us to bring forward, but they're still important to bring forward. And so I would like for us, on the record, to make note of what Commissioner Chris just shared, because I think it's really important, because it not only gets to power, it gets to privilege, and it gets to opportunity, and it gets to potentially exposure. And so, how do we bridge that gap? And I think you said it so beautifully that we just need to keep that in mind and add that to our overall perspective as commissioners. And
as a possible recommendation, you brought up a really good point. I had no idea that that many projects were focused in District 1, and that's not even something I thought about as I was thinking through this 4P assessment, was looking at the actual district map for the city and thinking about, even though I know where these projects were located, not correlating that with the district map. And just hearing somebody else verbalize that really made me think, like, well, why wouldn't we actually, and maybe this is something that's already on the city website, is that whenever they put out these RFPs, are they indicating what district, if it's, especially for an infrastructure project, is it going to be solely focused in one particular district or affect people in that area? It would be really interesting to see, that actually listed on the RFP or somewhere on the website as they're putting out these proposals.
I agree. I think that's great.
But to me, it seems like that's seems like a kind of obvious thing that, to me, it almost in the sense that if it's not there, that's almost on purpose to me, that they wouldn't, even that in all of these things, they don't necessarily put the address or any, there's a number of them that I couldn't even identify because it was so vague what it was listed as. And so a lot of that, the lack of information that was on this spreadsheet, to me signals something from the city, that they are providing us with this as the only resource that they're giving, and yet it is still so lacking in anything that could really aid in our analysis of the procurement and contracting process.
You bring forward a very, very good point. What triggers an RSP? Is it the person who has the loudest voice on the council? Or is it an actual need that is needed within that district that has to be met? Or what criteria are they using? Because if they're putting a lot of sidewalks in District 1, that's wonderful, but what about the rest of the districts? Do they need sidewalks? Don't they need crosswalks or lights, traffic lights or something like that to protect the pedestrians? I think we need to find out really what triggers an RSP. Once we understand what triggers the process to contract or procure services for the city, we understand then how to better look and see how the project disbursements are made across the entire city. Because if we're going to, because we are actually investing money. So if we're investing money in District 1 and we're looking and saying, well, we'd love to do it for the rest of the districts, but we've run out of money. That's not the right answer because they're paying their taxes. They're entitled to services too. So we need to look and see what triggers that response and to see if there's not a way that we can get them to understand that if the need is in District 1, then it's got to be in District 6 also. So look and see across the board where the actual need is. You may not be able to attack all the projects in District 1 to be able to afford the project across the board for all the districts. But at least you can say, honestly, we put sidewalks in the entire city of Brookhaven and made it safer for our elderly people to get from point A to point B because they have decent sidewalks, and we've cut down on traffic accidents because of crosswalks, XYZ, by looking how the funds are actually being spent.
And Commissioner Jim, I just want to amplify, thank you for saying that. I want to amplify a key word that you used in what you just shared, and that is where the needs are. So, you know, it doesn't work for us to say each area gets this amount of money. No, somebody has to be evaluating where the actual needs are, which will vary at a given time in a given district.
So, you know, as we're discussing, you know, all of our takes on the 4P assessment, you know, a couple of things I'm kind of seeing as a recurring theme as we kind of think about our big takeaways. One, it kind of seems like everyone, and correct me if I'm wrong, everyone's kind of in agreement that we need more information on the actual RFPs themselves, the contracts. Like, we just need more information about, you know, where this project is going to be. You know, they tell us where the project is going to be located, but what district, you know, who's going to impact the most, how to kind of tackle that essential question. It would be more helpful. Also navigating the contracts themselves, as Commissioner Moses mentioned, writing them in plain English, and maybe having some type of summary in the beginning so that makes it more concise, not necessarily dumbing it down, but just making it more concise that someone doesn't have to investigate through a 50, 60, 70 page contract to see what services are. So
yes.
If anyone else has any other like big takeaways, please share.
I think it would be also interesting to know how they make the decision on who is awarded the contract, especially in these things where they put out bids for hundreds of people. Like, what is it, what criteria, and what is that process like? They may not care to share it, but that would, to me, be another helpful thing in having a better context, you know, both whose voice gets heard on the front end and then how is the decision made on the back end.
And, you know, honestly, they don't have to share the information with us because we're not really interested in that answer. What we're interested in is asking the question, how is this done? And bringing it to the forefront because, you know, as we've talked time and time again, sometimes we have to have these very hard conversations about what in the world is going on and why are we doing it this way? And we don't really have to care what the answer is. What we have to do is put the question out there and make them aware that if it's obvious to us and we're all laymen to the games anyway, that anybody else is going to sit back and look at this and say, why are these things being done this way? So, you
That's
know,
right.
We're here to raise awareness at that end, to ask those questions. And some of them are, quite frankly, going to get nasty. But, you know, if we're willing to ask the question respectfully, but requesting an answer is not really necessary, but just knowing that we're there to ask the questions that maybe others are afraid to ask.
Well, to Chris's point, I will say I do think it would be helpful though to have a general criteria of how vendors are selected. And I know in previous meetings, we talked about maybe what other cities are doing, like Boston. I believe we looked at Seattle as well. Looking at how they, quite frankly, publicly put out their criteria, how they try to look at equity as it relates to procurement and contracting. Like they have a set 1 through 5, almost like a rubric. Like this is how we, make our decisions. And I think that is something that, Brookhaven is lacking right now. To Chris's point, I do think it would be helpful to have some type of clear criteria that the city is using as they're making these decisions.
Yeah, transparency goes a long way to build goodwill. And as long as you're doing everything out in the open and you're inviting people to look at it, they get the sense that you're doing the right thing. So I think that's very important.
I do too. And I think it's important for us to get comfortable with the discomfort of transparency.
Of course.
So
Well,
I was just gonna say, I appreciate everyone's feedback about the 4P assessment. I know that we only have 13 minutes, and so I do want to make sure we move along so we get a chance to hear about the progress on the survey for the vendors.
Well, I'll give everybody the Reader's Digest version on the survey. We had a wonderful young lady by the name of Alexandra who took the questions that we had gotten back from Steve. We gave him raw questions, and Steve converted them into the Likert scale for us. She took all of those things, cut and pasted them, and developed our Survey Monkey survey for us. And she did that in a couple of hours. I mean, she worked like a trooper on those, and she's even agreed to send them out using an official Brookhaven email address. That's why the push was from me to the commissioners to highlight their items on the spreadsheet so that we could get that to her. But Commissioner Thomas took that and he worked that piece himself. So we were able to give her a thumbs up and the email addresses and stuff to everything for that Survey Monkey survey just the other day. And Stephen, you were going to talk to her about that today?
Yes, I unfortunately didn't get to that on my list, but I'm going to email her right now and make sure that we have the guidance in there for the survey to be out. I think we said for 10 business days. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll do that. I'll make sure I follow up.
And today I posted yesterday a couple of videos that SurveyMonkey does to show what kind of reports can be pulled from the data that they're going to collect for us. And I asked the commissioners to please review those videos and come back with suggestions on what kind of reports we think we're going to need to make a written recommendation to the city to reinforce those recommendations. Now, from what I've seen on the videos, they appear to be pretty encompassing. So just about anything that we've asked a question about, we can write a report on through SurveyMonkey. And it's doing most of the data and analysis for us. So it should streamline some of the processes that we've got to stay on track of where we need to be to deliver a final product.
So
that's the Reader's Digest version on the Survey Monkey. As soon as Stephen has the conversation with Alexandra, we'll tell her to go ahead and pull the trigger, and we can start getting data back from our contractors on how they felt they were dealt with by the city. Let's be honest, that's what it is. It's customer satisfaction survey.
thank you, Commissioner Moses. And so really, once we're able to send out that contract with 10 business days as the goal for people to respond, really maybe by our next subcommittee meeting, we will already have some preliminary data to share with the group, share with the
And
subcommittee.
quite frankly, if the group starts giving us a heads up on what reports they would like to see, as soon as the data comes in, we could get somebody, Alexandra or somebody, to start running those reports or graphs or whatever we need based upon the data that we have, to see if there's any trends developing from the data we get as it's coming in. So we may not have to wait for all of the data to get in to come to an understanding of if we think that people did a wonderful job dealing with Brookhaven, or Brookhaven has some skeletons in its closet that we need to exercise.
Is it possible to get a copy of the survey, like how it looks, so that we can see?
Actually, there is I posted to Base Camp last week when I responded to let everybody know that Commissioner Thomas had taken over the task of getting the items identified to Alexandra. I also gave you a link to that survey. So you can go in there and look at it, and everything I get my little fat hands on, I put on Base Camp. So if there's something that you need to see from me, please look on Base Camp. Make it an issue to go there and look. And if you don't find it, then send me an email, say, hey, Jim, I'm looking for such and such. I might have forgot to post it on Base Camp. If I did, I'll put it there. And I appreciate that little nudge every now and then. I am getting old. This white beard is not a fashion statement, folks. I'm telling you.
And if it's more helpful, I think Commissioner Chris, I do have the link somewhere here. I can email it to you.
I see it now. I got it. Thank you, though.
Well,
And just another point of reference, and then I'll let Commissioner Thomas take us away. We had a discussion the other night, and it was pointed out to us that if we do this correctly, this can become a legacy document for the city to be using year in, year out, judge their own performance. And we also were talking about the fact that what we're doing right now is not trying to solve the problem, but build a good foundation, because we know we're going to recommend that this be an ongoing process. Build a strong foundation so that the next group of people who come in to do this don't have to start from ground zero. We've already done all the heavy lifting, and we've given them tools and put them in place that should make their job a little bit easier.
Completely agree. From volunteers to full-time staff, I completely agree with that.
Well, Commissioner Thomas, it's your floor.
I so move to call this meeting to an adjournment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Meeting
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Everyone have a wonderful evening, and please look over the stuff on Base Camp. If there's something that you see that I overlooked, send me a message and I'll do my best.
Great meetings, Commissioner Co-Chairs. Thank you so much.
All right, y'all take care.
All right,
Thanks, y'all.
bye-bye.
Thanks for your work.